to hear what you have to say, and I know everybody else is too. So I will hand the floor over to you, unless you'd like to add anything.
Nope. I second all that. She's amazing. That's why she's here.
You guys, all right, your check's in the mail. We're
Ah,
all in the will.
Okay. Yay.
So, yeah, what I like to do is, I usually do a presentation on a PowerPoint about what is the program, what are resident rights. I'm going to talk a little bit more off the cuff, and I really do like interaction. So if anybody has any questions, I would just say shout them out. Just shout them out. And I want to make sure I cover what the audience would like to hear. So my name's Gail. I work for a federal program called the Ombudsman Program. And the word ombudsman, which is impossible to say, it literally means the carrier of the message. It's a Swedish word. So basically what it is, as ombudsman in a long-term care setting, we are required to get to know the residents, do our best to make sure that they understand that they have rights, because many people don't know that they do. Sometimes they think that they can't speak up, or they don't have rights when they go into long-term care, and that's not true. So we want to empower them to know who to talk to if they have any concerns. And then also we resolve complaints. And the word complaint is often carries a negative connotation. It doesn't from my point of view. If somebody complains, I look at that as they're speaking up. They feel safe enough to voice their concerns. There are a lot of people that are afraid to speak up. So if somebody contacts us with a concern about a loved one in long-term care, that's good. We work throughout the entire state. Anywhere that there is a nursing home or assisted living, we advocate for those individuals. I've been with the program about 10 years. And what I can tell you is that there's a perception, this is from my point of view, okay? There is a perception, well, first, let me ask this. How many people who are here have a loved one in long-term care or are considering it? And I don't know if that's the situation or not. Yuta, maybe you can help me. Do we have anybody here who's considering long-term care, has a loved one in long-term care?
I would say we have a good 3 or 4 or 5.
Oh, okay, good. Oh, great. We work for the resident, period. We will work with family members, and of course we work with facility staff and providers. We're not against anybody, but our concern is what's life like for that resident. And what I find is that for individuals who have dementia, Alzheimer's, we hear a lot from family members about how they want their loved ones' day-to-day experience to be. For example, I want my loved one to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning. I want them to go to bed by 7 o'clock at night. I don't want them to interact with other people because, you know, I know my mother has dementia, but she's not like those other people. I hear that a lot. And my first question is, what other people are you talking about? The staff? Other residents? What are we talking about here? But what I hear is that there's a desire to want to protect, really protect our loved ones with memory loss. And I always find that interesting because you're paying for long-term care. Why do you feel that you need to protect your loved ones from something? You're paying for a service that's being provided. And the only thing I can think is that, you know, it's your loved one. People are afraid. People don't know what could happen. So therefore, let's play it safe. And there can be a tendency to ask for what I call surplus safety. It's a term a lot of people use, meaning let's just do the easiest thing and we'll do it across the board. for, in its worst form, surplus safety and long-term care would have been using restraints. Because we don't want to see somebody fall. Okay, so the best thing to do is let's just use a restraint. Let's put up some bed rails or use a gate belt, and that way people won't fall, which is true. But it's also very illegal. And it's also, unless there is a physician's order, but it's also, who does it serve? Does that really serve the individual, or does that serve the person taking care of the individual or the facility? So I'm really happy to know that those days seem to be long behind us when people utilized restraints. But that's a kind of thinking surplus safety. Let's make sure everybody's okay, to the point where it's not okay for a loved one to be put, quote unquote, at risk. Okay. What is at risk? What does it mean when you want your loved one to be up at a certain time and go to bed at a certain time? What's the reason? Is it because you're afraid something might happen? And that's almost always the case. I don't want them to be hurt by somebody else. So one of the things that I always listen for is, has the big bad thing happened? Because I understand wanting the best for your loved one and wanting to make sure that they're going to be okay. But being afraid of something that might not ever occur, I want to do my best as an ombudsman to give that family member or power of attorney peace of mind that might not happen. You don't need to be braced for a fight, in other words. Does that make some sense? Okay. And this just runs across the board. There's something I just every extreme. There's something that I teach when I do, I teach in the community about long-term care and options and getting ready for long-term care, what to look for in a facility. I also will come in and teach facility staff and also residents and family members. But one thing I talk about a lot is ability to do what, or competent. Competent is a word I hear a lot. My loved one is not competent. Okay. Competent to do what? Well, they have been declared incompetent or incapacitated. Okay. Again, to do what? And that's often where we start a very fascinating conversation, because there can be the perception that because somebody has a diagnosis of dementia or Alzheimer's, that it's a blank slate. And that means, okay, I must make every single decision because I'm the power of attorney. And I'm reading what Sally wrote. One size fits no one well. Absolutely. But it's almost as if the perception is that you lose your individuality. You stop being a person and you become a diagnosis. And that is not the case at all. So I welcome doing training with family members. Now, your loved one's memory might have shifted, certainly, but that doesn't mean that and they might not be competent, quote unquote, let's say, to understand cause and effect in one area, but that doesn't mean that they don't know what they want. That doesn't mean that they don't know how they feel or they can't express choice. Even with dementia, people are always expressing choice, always. And that tends to come as a surprise sometimes. And that tends to also be accompanied by, then I really have to be in the facility to make sure X, Y, and Z doesn't happen. So my role is to let's go back a little bit. Let's go back a little bit. Who, for lack of a better term, who has the problem? Does the resident have a problem? Does your loved one at home have a problem, or is it your perception? And I've had to have some conversations with people. For example, there's a woman, and I'm not going to name any names, but at this point, after doing this for over 10 years, for every facility in the state, I think I've heard everything until the day comes when, oh, here's a new one, here's another one. But there is a trend that I've noticed. My mom or my dad, they're in long-term care, they have memory loss. And the worst thing in the world has happened. What? I'm thinking they fell or they were hurt. They found a romantic partner. Oh, and then, thank God you're there. What would you like me to do? We've got to stop this. Why? Well, because I mean, they could get hurt. We hear that all the time. They could get hurt. So one of my standard speeches is, remember when you were growing up and you might have had a boyfriend or a romantic partner and your parent wasn't real crazy about it, and they tried to tell you that maybe this wasn't the greatest person in the world, but they didn't take your rights away from you in terms of getting to know who this person was. Same thing here. It's now your turn to allow your parent to have a relationship. And by the way, instead of it being scary, and I understand why it could be scary because it's a fear of the unknown, but it isn't scary for the resident necessarily unless we know it is. If I'm hearing my loved one does this, my loved one gets upset whenever they're approached. Okay, in any context, that's going to be an issue. But what if your loved one is willingly holding hands with old man Jones over there? And I no, because what will happen? Okay, we get that a lot. To which I will say, are you worried that your mother's going to get pregnant? Is that the issue here? What are you afraid of? Don't want them to get hurt. If you're fortunate enough to find somebody you're comfortable with and you like being around at any age and it's safe, I think that is such a blessing. And there's a big degree of trust that staff are trained. They understand what signs to look for. Just because it's in a romantic context doesn't automatically mean it's highlighted to be anything bad. Does that make some sense? So again, our job is to resolve complaints, and we resolve complaints to the satisfaction of the resident. We also investigate allegations of abuse, neglect, and exploitation. Very often, we can resolve a complaint, put it to rest, without verifying that the complaint really, or that the situation really occurred the way the person thinks it did. And that's the best scenario, when you can give somebody peace of mind and move forward. It's rare that we find a facility that does not want to work with us. Because we're a federal program, they have to. And for the most part, I would say the vast majority of our facilities understand that we're a partner. We're not out to get anybody or to find out what's going wrong. The way I like to think about it is we're there to make sure that nothing escalates. If there is a concern, and this gets very interesting, especially when I'm out at New Mexico Behavioral Health, where almost everybody has a guardian. It's very easy to assume that what you're hearing probably didn't happen that way. When people have different realities. Yeah, well, they have some dementia, or they have some Alzheimer's or behavioral health issues. They probably they didn't really go down the way that they're explaining. And that is a huge concern to me, because we already have a population that's at risk. But when you make an assumption that because somebody has a behavioral health need or a different reality, Alzheimer's or dementia, that it's probably didn't go that way, that person is even more ripe for exploitation and abuse, in my opinion. So when you're at a place where just about everybody has a guardian and you say to somebody, gee, how are you doing today? I'm doing okay, a lot better since my caregiver put that gun away. Okay. It would be easy to go, well, come on, they probably don't have a gun. They probably don't. Two things would be wrong with that. Number one, I don't know. I still have to look into it. Is there a gun here or not, right? But also, if you tell somebody who's got a concern, oh, I'm sure it didn't happen. I know that wouldn't give me peace of mind. I also wouldn't feel like I'm heard. So with people with, again, with different realities, Alzheimer's, dementia, let's take care of it right now. Let's look into it right now. Let's put this to rest right now. And that is always the approach that I use. Does anybody have any questions about what our program is? If not, I also want to talk about the community options, because I recognize that not everybody wants to be in wants their loved one or wants to be in long-term care. There's a lot of options for people to stay at home. And we have the Aging and Long-Term Services Resource Center in Santa Fe. That is also a federal requirement that every state have a resource center staffed with independent counselors on a variety of topics. Anybody can call in. I want to give you the number. How do I get home health? My home health provider didn't show up. I'm interested in long-term care, but I don't know where to start. Or the big one, my loved one has some Alzheimer's, dementia. They're going to need long-term care, but I don't want them going into a nursing home. Now, when I hear that, why not? Oh, nursing homes are bad. Assisted livings are good. Okay. Okay, where are you getting that from? Or that place is bad, but that place is good. Where are you getting this information from? Because what we don't want to do is cement a reality for somebody that's maybe not true. This big bad facility, how did you hear it was bad? Oh, my friend's mom was there. When? 1970. A lot has changed since then. So I want to give people peace of mind that what somebody's experience was doesn't mean it's the next person's experience. The other thing, if anybody's considering long-term care, of course, they can call our resource center. I'm getting ready to give you their number, but it's fine to call the Ombudsman Program as well. People ask us all the time, what's the best facility? There's no answer. Best for who? Best for what? What does your loved one want? Let's start there. They need access to 24/7 care, but I don't want them to be in a nursing home. Nursing homes are bad. One of the things I'll do is tell people, I'll give them a list of everything that's available. I'll try my best to figure out, what do you want? What amenities does your loved one want? Which facility might have them, which one might not. But fundamentally, this is what the regs say everybody has to have. And let people know what the regulations are, so they don't think that people can just do whatever they feel like. That's not the case. I want them to know how many people are involved in making sure that your loved one is okay. For anybody who's interested, I'm going to call out the number for our resource center, Aging and Disability Resource Center. You can call them at any time. They have counselors there. They can talk to you about Social Security, benefits, home health care, sometimes insurance needs, things that the Ombudsman doesn't cover. The number is 800-432-2080. And the other thing I wanted to talk about, let me take a look at my time. As Ombudsman, there's one thing that makes me, I just wish it would go away more than anything. And that's the big bad word, behaviors, especially with Alzheimer's and dementia. We'll hear from somebody, this person's having a behavior. They're having a behavior. Okay, what does that mean? All of us are having behaviors all the time, constantly. What does that mean? A lot of times what I'm hearing, and sometimes I hear the word attached to it, well, they're not compliant. I don't know how you guys feel about that word. It makes me bristle. Compliant with what? With what we want them to do. And my feeling is, well, good for them. If they don't want to do that, then they don't have to. No, but they do, because our staff have to finish this, this, and this. Okay, so we're going to have a conversation about residents' rights, because a resident does not have to comply with something unless they want to, and unless they're actively hurting themselves. So we're going to talk just really briefly, and then I'm going to get on to my next section. Utah, is that right? Okay. What's the difference between what's in somebody's best interest and what's something that they want. We hear this a lot. It's in my mom's best interest, or it's in the resident's best interest to do the following. Okay. The difference between what you want and what's in your best interest, this is the best way I can explain it. 2 words. Dunkin' Donuts. Has anybody ever gone to Dunkin' Donuts? This is so weird talking to an audience I can't hear. I just assume you're all out there. Dunkin' Donuts, they exist. They're on every corner. Why? Because it's in our best interest to have fat and sugar and caffeine. No, they're there because we like it. And when it comes to our residents, I want them to have what they like. But this might happen that maybe not. But there's a lot that gives you joy in life. We don't want to see that taken away from a resident. Okay, so we always want to know what is it that this resident wants, not just what's in their best interest. Okay, any questions on any of this? No?
Sally did have a question. Do you visit all the homes around the state, or do you wait for someone to call you?
Okay, it's a great question. There's 2 parts to what we do. One of them is visiting with the residents, letting them know who we are. We're here. We're a resource for you. You don't have to talk to us. You don't have to have a complaint, but we're here. We're a resource for you. So that we always do. We are required to be in every facility at least every quarter, nursing homes and assisted living facilities. And when we show up, sometimes people hold their breath and they're freaked out. The state is here. The state is here. Well, we're the only entity in the state that has 24/7 access to these buildings. Department of Health does not. They should only be in a building if they're doing a survey. When we're in the facility, we're not looking for something wrong. And often that's a perception. No. If I see something and I think, oh, wow, the banister is a little bit loose, let's say, I'm going to tell the facility, I don't want to see them get a deficient practice or get a deficiency. So we're always there visiting residents so that they know who we are. In terms of, I have loud dogs and I apologize. In terms of complaint resolution, that's a little different. We can resolve complaints without having to go into a building. Investigation strategies, that's an entire conversation, and I would love to talk about it another time. But how do we determine what is happening? I have spent years doing investigation work, and I don't approach it from a prove it to me attitude or anything like that. It's pretty obvious to find out what happened. I'm not coming from a punitive place. I'm coming from, if things are going right and we still have a complaint, let's get it addressed. Doesn't mean you did anything wrong. Person might not understand. So we're in the buildings visiting residents as a going concern. We will also go into the buildings to do trainings, and because we have access 24/7, there are times we might show up. We always show up unannounced, always. This is pre-COVID, but we might show up at 4 a.m. in your building. Why? What I train all of our staff and all of our volunteers on is don't do that. Don't do that unless I know it. I know why you're going in. It's just not good practice to show up at 4 a.m. If you have a reason, if you're hearing same thing seems to be happening on a certain shift, okay, go check it out. But just because you're awake doesn't mean that you need to go and check in on a building. Okay. Anybody have any questions about the Ombudsman program or what we do? I'm going to give out my direct number so anybody can call me at any time. For anything. It doesn't have to be just if there is a complaint. For any kind of information, I'd be happy to talk to anybody. My number is 505-231-3349. We have the entire state broken out into regions, and each region has a regional coordinator. We have an ombudsman in Roswell. We have one in Las Cruces. We have 2 in metro area, and one in the Northeast, one in the Northwest. And then we have volunteers all throughout the state. Okay. So we're there just to make sure people understand, you know, we want to help this individual have a good quality of life in addition to having a good quality of care. And if that means I want to hold hands with somebody, cool.
I love that you shared that, Gail. There's no question over the years we've had that experience many times. And it's the one that comes to mind. It was two families that I think were uncomfortable with it at first, but then embraced it. And it was just this beautiful love story where
Sure.
the families became close, and it was at Sierra Vista. And it was really, really cool. Really kind of a
I
neat
want to
thing.
thank you. I want to put a scenario out there. I'm not saying there's a right answer, but I had this in one of my trainings with all of our volunteers, and it was a wild discussion. I'm not saying, I know how I feel, but I'm not saying that there's a right answer. I got a call from somebody, this individual's, and I'm not saying what facility it was in, but this individual's mother was having a relationship with a man. They were both in residence in the Alzheimer's unit. Okay, what's the problem? My mother cannot consent. Tell me more about that. Is she acting afraid? Oh, no, she's not acting afraid. She's willingly holding his hand and now they're kissing. So why are you saying that your mom can't consent? My mom has Alzheimer's. She thinks this man that she's with is my father, and he's not. What makes it really interesting, on the other side of the story, the man's family, they reported that he thinks he's on a first date with this woman. So that raised a really interesting question. What is consent? She's not consenting because she thinks it's somebody else. So I asked my volunteers and I asked our staff, do you think that that's consent or not? Are people consenting to an act? Are they consenting to be with the other person? And let's just put dementia and Alzheimer's aside. How well do you know anybody? So and boy, did we have a heated conversation. If you're not afraid to be with somebody and you consent to hold their hand, I don't care if you think it's Tom Selleck or whoever, that's up to you. Have a nice time. But that's not okay. And then I actually had to tell this family member, did you ever go to a bar in the 80s? Did you ever go to a bar in the 70s? How well did you know the person that you were, okay, I get it. So yeah. What else? Alyuta, did you want me to talk a little bit about improv?
Real quick before you do that, Pam did give a question.
Sure.
I think it's Gigi and Gail have the same role in the same area?
Now, who asked the question?
It was Pamela Grand.
Oh, well, hi, Pamela. I'm not sure that I know you. Gigi is a regional coordinator. She covers the northeast part of the state. I supervise all of the regional coordinators. But we all do the same thing, in a sense. What I do is monitor the work of all the regional coordinators. So when they call and they tell me that somebody, oh my gosh, you would not believe what happened. Tell me. And then we break it down step by step by step. There's always a knee-jerk response to anything. Always. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. Let's get past that and break it down to, but who said this? But who was there? How do we know? But that's investigation. So advocacy is one thing. The desire to speak with somebody or on their behalf to make sure they have what they want and a good quality of life. Investigation is a whole different animal. And that can take a long time. So my expertise, if you will, working with the regional coordinators is let's back up. Let's talk about that investigation, because we're not going to take hearsay as truth. And if you weren't there to hear something, well, then it could happen again, right? That's what advocates do. Sure, it could. Whatever's happening, there's ways to find out. And just because something is happening doesn't mean it's happening the way you think it is. So it's fascinating. It's just fascinating.
You can tell you enjoy what you do. I sense a lot of passion, and you're very
I
good.
love it. And I'm going to tell you, the best part of the job is getting to know our residents.